Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Duncan Theater. In consideration for the other patrons, please take the time now to silence your cell phones and pagers. If we do hear your cell phone ringing during the middle of the performance, we're going to have our entire trombone section come into the audience and tackle you. Please refrain from any flash photography or video. You all know how easily jazz musicians are distracted. During the performance, if you need to enter or exit the audience area, please wait until the thunderous applause between musical selections. We now invite you to sit back, relax, and tap your toes to the music. Thank you.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Duncan Theater for an evening celebrating the music of Duke Ellington and Billy Strayhorn. That was the Palm Beach State College Tuesday night band under the direction of David Gibble, who's also playing in the trumpet section. David, there he is. Is there anyone this evening who's never heard of Duke Ellington? No. Billy Strayhorn? Oh, so we don't have to do anything else. Everybody knows this. Wouldn't it be great, won't it be great to hear these great songs of Satin Doll and Mood Indigo, Don't Get Around Much Anymore, all those great standard tunes that we are not going to play this evening. Did you know that Ellington wrote over 1,700 tunes in his lifetime, and we're only familiar with about 25 of them. So this evening, we're going to hear the other 1,675. So I hope you brought a dinner. Our opener, let's see, this is supposed to be working, but it's not. Don't blame the technical crew. There we go. We heard the Harlem Air Shaft. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that. That was written in 1940. It's full of surprising twists and turns, which you may have noticed or not. It expanded upon the commonly used 32-bar song form. But I don't want to bore you with all these many technical details. In that piece were many of the hallmarks of the Ellington sound, the use of those mutes, in particular the plunger mute, the close saxophone harmonies, the playing of one section of instruments against another at the same time, what we call counterpoint or polyphony, the short solo bits among many of the instruments. The second piece, I think we're probably familiar with because it's a great and commonly used jam tune. Started out, I think the Duke would play a C on the piano, just play it, and then the rest of the band would kind of follow suit, and it became a blues, and who would know it would become such a standard tune that we all play today. Well, that was the C Jam Blues. We heard solos by Kevin Wilde on the trumpet and Tim Walters on the trumpet, Tom Mitchell clarinet, Neil Basher on the guitar, Devin Heinrichs on the tenor sax, Kevin Krpanik on the trombone. We can give him a hand. Hopefully, by the end of the concert, we'll all have gained some understanding and appreciation for the greatest composer of American music, as he is known. From the 1920s to the 70s, Duke Ellington led one of history's finest performing ensembles. He expanded jazz into a sophisticated, international celebrated art form. He played piano, but his real instrument was the orchestra. It's been said that Louis Armstrong created jazz. Well, Duke Ellington created form in jazz. What we're talking about form, that means the way that music proceeds from beginning to end with contrast and repetition and things like that. And we'll hear a lot of that tonight. And it makes it for better listening to see what's really going on in the music. Our next selection demonstrates what can be done with call and response. Now, the idea of one person or group answering another goes way back in time, particularly in West African music. I imagine we all have participated in responsive readings in church or maybe in school. In the next piece, we see how musical exchanges are slowly transformed to build tension and energy in this basically traditional 12-bar blues. This was originally written for trombonist Tricky Sam Nanton. Obviously, played the trombone. And in Coco, notice how the solos are integrated into the texture of the work as a whole. And here's Coco. Kevin Kirpanik on the trombone. And we had a little bit of bass there with David Tomasello. Edward Kennedy Ellington was born in 1899 in Washington, D.C., to a middle-class family, and he himself said he was, quote, pampered and spoiled rotten by all the women in the family. As he continued saying, my parents were very strict about seeing I got everything I wanted, unquote. Even before high school, he acquired his nickname Duke, most likely from his good manners and immaculate dress and distinguished bearing. He was basically self-taught, although as a young boy he took lessons briefly from a Miss Clinkscales. I just had to say that because it's true, but it's an interesting name for someone teaching scales. But the lessons didn't go too well. He missed more lessons than he got to, and he was more interested in playing baseball, but it wasn't until after his first and only marriage, at the age of 19, that he pursued music seriously. He learned to play piano as many others did at that time. Now, if you're familiar with the player piano, and it runs on this perforated paper roll, and as it runs through these holes, the keys go down. And this is how many of the piano players, the old piano players in those days, learned to play piano. They just put their fingers on those keys that kept going down. And usually it was James P. Johnson's piano roll of Carolina Shout. That's how Fats Waller learned to play. Ellington had an aura that extended beyond the bandstand and captivated his audience, especially the women. This showmanship helped him get his first important gig at Harlem's famous Cotton Club, lasting from 1927 to 1931. This enabled him to explore and experiment with new ideas in sound and arrangements for the floor shows, sounds which were relayed all over the country via radio. So he's already becoming pretty popular that way. His famous saying to his audience, do you know it? "We love you madly." Duke was well aware of his charisma and used his powers without scruples whenever he thought it necessary. His younger sister, Ruth, said that he definitely wasn't direct with anybody about anything. Yet he talked so fluently and impressively that nearly everyone believed him. When it came to women, he drew upon an endless supply of come-on lines. For example, I quote, "I knew you were here because the whole studio was suddenly aglow with the turquoise radiance." Beautiful. In the early years, Ellington understood something about jazz that no other band leader, composer, arranger seemed to understand. It's the musicians. It's not the instruments, not the gestures of the leader or dots on the paper, but the musicians that make the music. Consequently, Ellington sought out musicians who could give his imagination something to work on and who made his band sound different. Other bands like Benny Goodman, Tommy Dorsey, Glenn Miller, they tended to sound about the same except for the stars in those groups, like with Gene Krupa, with Harry James, with Benny Goodman, Johnny Mintz. In the Ellington band, they were all stars. And you'll see tonight, because we're playing authentic arrangements of the Ellington band, see that most everyone in the band has a solo of some kind within each piece. Let's mention some of those names who were with him for many years. There's a few. Cootie Williams, Barney Bigard, Sam Nanton. And we have Ray Nance, violin. I don't think we've ever seen a violinist in the Glenn Miller band or Benny Goodman or any of those, but it was a sound. And notice the mute that Ray Nance plays. He also played the trumpet. The great Ben Webster, one of the greatest, often copied. Juan Tizol from Puerto Rico. And you'll notice that his trombone looks different from all the other ones because he played the valve trombone. It's much easier to press a valve than to hold a slide out or pull it in and out. And he played an important role in the Ellington band. Let's see, next. Well, if you're a jazz fan, you're familiar with all those names as some of the greatest in jazz. Ellington was inspired by his musicians. In rehearsal, he heard players practicing their own licks and melodies from which he would often develop entire compositions. Usually, Ellington considered such finished works, his own, and didn't give credit when due. In fact, at one time, Johnny Hodges, well aware that Duke would borrow ideas from his playing without giving credit, told Duke one time, "Stay out of the kitchen." Here's a tune Ellington wrote for trombonist Lawrence Brown. he was in one of those photos there, who inspired trombonists like Tommy Dorsey and Bill Harris. It's Blue Cellophane. We're featuring Mike Egan on the trombone. Mike Egan on the trombone. Someone once said about Ellington, quote, the only thing harder than getting him out of bed in the afternoon was getting him to finish writing a new piece of music in time for the premiere. And this about someone who wrote hundreds of tunes. And of course, Ellington said, I don't need time, what I need is a deadline. Of course, that's true for a lot of musicians and a lot of hosts. But when he did get to work, he wrote with amazing speed and self-assurance, as his musicians would attest. The next composition points to the direction jazz would take in the future. Cottontail, written in 1940, was a startling modern composition, an example of modern jazz before there even was a term modern jazz. The beboppers of the 40s in particular were influenced heavily by its angular melody and advanced harmonic extensions. The harmonies emphasized ninths and flatted fifths, and those two notes were important in the development of the bebop vocabulary of Dizzy Gillespie and Charlie Parker. Now, I don't expect everyone to know what the ninth is or the flatted fifth, but if you know Leonard Bernstein's Maria, that is a flatted fifth. And I just learned the other day that the producers said Leonard Bernstein should never have written that because it's unsingable. But don't go by me, by my voice. Perhaps more importantly, Cottontail represented a new approach to composition that included improvisation as a key element in big band writing. It helped shape a new role for jazz that was beginning to emerge during the swing era. Jazz didn't have to be music for dancing. It could exist as an art form for its own sake. It depended upon a listening audience that was willing to go along for the ride, like you. As we listen to this piece, which is certainly danceable, don't worry about trying to absorb everything I just said. Just enjoy the exuberance and the fun. And here we go. By the way, if it sounds like George Gershwin's I Got Rhythm, it's no coincidence. Cottontail. Tom Mitchell on the tenor sax, Kevin Wilde on the trumpet. We had Chris Ferranti on the baritone sax, Dolph Castellano on a little stride piano there. How about that sax soli? Soli is like, instead of one person, a whole section playing. One of the hallmarks of the Duke Ellington band. Kind of a short ending, wasn't it? Kind of ends kind of abruptly. Well, as far as that abrupt ending goes, Ellington told Louis Armstrong, as long as something is unfinished, because there's a feeling that it didn't finish, there's always that little feeling of insecurity, which is absolutely necessary unless you're so rich that it doesn't matter, unquote. Clark Terry, one of the many stars of the Ellington band, noted, quote, "He doesn't like to write definitive endings to a piece," unquote. Ellington believed that unfinished endings are reality. By the way, in that photo, Harry Carney happened to be one of those who did get credit for his collaboration on Rockin' in Rhythm, which we'll be playing a little bit later. Ironically, the musician who made the most significant contribution to Ellington's musical legacy was rarely seen on the bandstand. Billy Strayhorn, nicknamed Sweet Pea, worked for Ellington as an arranger, composer, occasional pianist, and collaborator. Many pieces that we think of as Ellington compositions were, in reality, written by Billy Strayhorn. And what comes to mind for me is Take the A Train. You notice the middle picture is probably the reason why he died very young. Strayhorn studied classical music and would have entered the classical field if not for the reality that black composers had great difficulty being accepted in the white world of classical music at that time. It was 1939 when the two first met, and Ellington asked the young musician to play for him after a show. Author David Hadju relates, quote, "Strayhorn did the gutsiest thing imaginable. He played Sophisticated Lady, and he said, 'Well, Mr. Ellington, this is the way you just played it in concert,' demonstrating that he could mimic the Duke perfectly. Then he said, 'Well, this is the way I would play it,' and proceeded to play it his own way." Of course, Ellington was very impressed with that, with the young man and the shy pianist, and took him under his wing. He rapidly made an almost complete assimilation of Ellington's style, and it became difficult, actually, to tell who wrote what. Their relationship lasted for 30 years until Strayhorn's death from cancer. Ellington said Strayhorn was, I quote, "My right arm, my left arm, all the eyes in the back of my head, my brain waves in his head and his in mine," unquote. I want you to listen to a lyric, and I hope I can say it in a meaningful way here. "Romance is mush, stifling those who strive. I'll give a lush life in some small dive, and there I'll be while I rot with the rest of those whose lives are lonely too." Can you believe that was written by a 16-year-old Billy Strayhorn? I've asked Dolph to play Strayhorn's music that went with those lyrics, and this very sophisticated, beautiful song became one of the most recorded ballads in jazz, "Lush Life." Dolph Castellano. Dolph Castellano. On a rainy day in Los Angeles in 1941, Billy Strayhorn wrote Rain Check. It's one of his early compositions, and the melody is still often quoted by improvising musicians. Another one of those short endings. Alan Lamp on the trombone, Devin Heinrichs on the tenor sax, Kevin Wild on the trumpet, Dolph Castellano on the piano. In 1963, the Ellington Band toured the Middle East under the sponsorship of the State Department. They performed in, among other places, Beirut, Amman, Kabul, Tehran, Baghdad, and Cairo. Can you imagine that being done today? That tour inspired a recording in 1966 for an album entitled The Far East Suite. I know it doesn't make sense, they were in the Near East, but this became the Far East Suite. It was arranged in 9 compositions by Ellington and Strayhorn, except for one of them. On that album is a beautiful ballad written for Johnny Hodges. Probably Johnny Hodges was the greatest ballad player of all time. The piece was named Isfahan, which is a city that has been called the Pearl of Persia, and this has become a jazz standard. Performing it this evening is Hudson Furtado in the Johnny Hodges tradition. Hudson Furtado. Isn't that about the most beautiful thing you've ever heard? Maybe that will bring peace to the Middle East. I don't know. And you did notice that the saxophone that he's using is different from all the others, a whole different color than the others. And why? Why is yours saxophone different?
This is nickel plated.
Oh, it's nickel plated. Is that cheaper or more expensive? Anyway, maybe it's the instrument that makes that liquid sound, but I don't know that Johnny Hodges sounded any better than that. Wait a minute, that's not right yet. No, no applause. No applause. I have to go back, but I can't see anything. There. Now everybody's wondering what UMMG means. Anybody know? Maybe some of you have been there. In 1956, Strayhorn composed and arranged UMMG. It's an acronym for Upper Manhattan Medical Group. Ellington's doctor was Arthur Logan, and he belonged to that group. This features several soloists intermingled between some rhythmic punctuations in the brasses and contrasting saxophones, like we've heard in other pieces here. Note the extensive use of plunger mutes, again, in the brasses, which is very much a part of the Ellington sound. While we're talking about those mutes, I'm going to ask the brass section, as I talk about a mute, they can kind of hold it up so you got an idea what it is, like the typical straight mute that orchestral players use, and sometimes jazz players will use. Here you go. The cup mute, we've heard some of that. And the solo tone, I didn't know anybody, you have that tonight? Yeah. Why don't you play a little bit of that? If you remember the Song of India that Tommy Dorsey played, well, he played on the trumpet. Song of India? The Harmon mute, or sometimes the wah-wah mute. We got that? Yeah. Kevin is going to... Yeah. And King Oliver used this buzz wah-wah. I don't know if we have one of those, but it sounds like a kazoo. Sounded like a kazoo. Bucket mutes, derbies, they're really hats. No. Yes, not tonight. And the plunger. I have to tell this story. You know, the plunger is a plunger. Dave told me that this was a younger band in the day one time, and he asked them all to go get plungers. One kid came back trying to play the plunger, but the stick was still on it. And he kept knocking out the trombone player in front of him. No, that wasn't. But that's true. Plungers were particularly important in the distinctive sound of the Ellington Band, as you've already heard, and it was trumpeter Bubber Miley. He was the one that kind of trademarked that idea, and it was continued by Cootie Williams. Trombonist Tricky Sam Nanton also added a little growl to it. So here's Strayhorn's tribute to Ellington's doctor, UMMG, Upper Manhattan Medical Group. Not yet. Tom Mitchell on the clarinet, Tim Walters on the trumpet, Neil Basher on the guitar. Now for the slide you've all been waiting for. Whoop. There. We are going to take a small break now, but be ready for a really exciting second half with some music that some of you may even be familiar with. Thank you. Hello, am I on? All of the arrangements. Oh, welcome back. Is everybody back? I can't see anything, but anyway, all of these arrangements this evening are transcribed by David Berger from original recordings and are in the Jazz of Lincoln Center Library Connection. The Ellington Band recorded many tunes many times, and they all sound different depending upon who was in the band at the time. So what we're playing are the arrangements that were made that they listened to and were made. Sometimes new arrangements in the Ellington Band were just made on the fly. Anyway, our next selection represents another collaborative effort of Ellington and Strayhorn, originally written as a begin and featured trumpeter Cat Anderson. Now, you may remember, if you've ever heard of the Duke Ellington Band anytime, there's this trumpet player who plays about 2, 3, 4 octaves above the staff and becomes very, very exciting. That was Cat Anderson. And tonight we feature our own Cat Albert. I didn't say Fat Albert now. It's Cat. However, would you like to demonstrate a couple of high C's there? Double high C's? Yeah, there you go. That wasn't how we planned it. Okay. Anyway, here is our own Albert playing the Eighth Veil. Albert Pereira. Albert Pereira, great job. Everything the band performed this evening is about 3 minutes long, if you may have noticed. And of course, the reason, 78 RPM records. I doubt that Mozart, Beethoven, or Mahler could be told that they had to limit their compositions to 3 minutes. Well, Ellington hated this time restraint. In the 1930s, Ellington's manager, Irving Mills, persuaded 2 record companies to record Ellington's extended composition, Creole Rhapsody. The piece took up both sides of a disc. Mills was the man responsible for many of the band's successes, including getting him into the famous Cotton Club, where original extended compositions were very common. Indeed, Ellington and Strayhorn did stretch out not only in length but in ideas when they arranged their music from Peer Gynt Suite. You remember that piece? It was composed by Norwegian composer Edvard Grieg. Most of us heard this in school and childhood. But the 5 movements were recorded in 1960, but the reception in some places was not greeted with great enthusiasm, particularly in Norway. Protests came from the Greek Foundation, the album viewed as an offensive attack on Grieg's musical reputation was banned from public distribution throughout Scandinavia for nearly a decade. The president of the foundation called Ellington's Peer Gynt ugly and uninspired, unquote. Scandinavian music lovers in general were shocked to find that the famous suite had been jazzed up and was being circulated in its corrupted form on phonograph records. Remember In the Hall of the Mountain King? Salve's Song, Anitra's Dance. Well, we're going to hear these 3 excerpts as arranged by the Duke and Sweet Pea. In them resides the full range of expression in an Ellington band. We'll hear the wah-wah from the plungers, complex counterpoint between sections and soloists, saxophone section, dissonances, cross-voicings, so on. Cross-voicings, Ellington was the one who started where he would take, normally you had the saxophone section, the trombones, and the trumpet section, and maybe the brass section and woodwinds, I suppose, normally. But he would take, and you may have noticed from time to time, maybe a trombone player playing with the sax section. This is what is known as this cross voicings. Also, the voicings, that is the way that the notes are put on the page and the instruments that play them. This is called the voicings. And Andre Previn, who you may know as a jazz piano player, or you may know as a conductor of the London Philharmonic, or as a film writer, he said that you could listen to a Stan Kenton recording, or the Stan Kenton band, which was full of dissonances, and write down, know exactly what those voicings were. But trying to figure out what Ellington did in those voicings was very, very difficult. You know that the clarinet plays quite a bit with the saxophone section, but it does not sound like the Glenn Miller band, does it? It's totally different sound. It has to do with the voicings. Sometimes he's got the low instrument, the baritone sax, above some of the higher pitch instruments in that. So that's why we're hearing that unusual sound. Anyway, here we go with the 3 movements as conceived by Ellington and Strayhorn from Grieg's Peer Gynt Suite, starting with the Hall of the Mountain King. In order was Dolph Castellano on the piano, Tom Mitchell on the clarinet, Mike Egan on the trombone, Ron Nordwall on the alto sax, Devin Heinrichs on the tenor sax. Now, you Norwegians can come back into the room. The railroad has inspired over 1,000 train songs, from the early blues masters to Bruce Springsteen, even James Taylor. Can you think of any big band train songs? I think I heard it. I'm not surprised. Chattanooga Choo Choo, of course, probably one of the most famous. But there were many that actually Duke Ellington wrote himself. And this one, Happy-Go-Lucky Local, in his autobiography, Ellington says, quote, told the story of a train in the South. Not one of those luxurious streamlined trains that take tourists to Miami. I'd like to see that one. But a little train with an upright engine that was never fast, never on schedule, and never made stops at any place you ever heard about. After grunting, groaning, and jerking, it finally settled down to a steady medium tempo, unquote. And when I listen to this, I feel like I'm inside the train looking out. It's a very imaginative writing here, but I think you'll still recognize the elements of Ellington. And there may be a little surprise, there might be a little tune in there that you're very familiar with. So here we go. Happy-Go-Lucky Local. All aboard. I'll bet most of you have never heard anything like that before. Let's recognize on that tune, there are various solos throughout, but let's recognize the engine of that train with Dolph Castellano on the piano, Dave Tomasello on the bass, and Carl Ott on the drums. One of the great soloists that Ellington was able to write for, and we've heard before, was his lead alto saxophonist player, Johnny Hodges, who had that very rich tone, exquisitely flowing lines, and elegance. It's about the only way to describe that. It's just elegant. And here's another ballad written for him called Warm Valley. In his autobiography, Ellington explains, quote, "While driving along the south side of the Columbia River, east of Portland, Oregon, we had a good view of the mountains on the north shore. They had the most voluptuous contours, and to me they looked like a lot of women reclining up there." Warm Valley came directly from that experience. So performing this beautiful ballad is our lead alto saxophonist, Ron Nordwall. And that was Kevin Wild on the muted trumpet. Allow me to introduce the man responsible for putting this program together. rehearsing the band as well as playing in it, that is not easy to do because you got your mind on one thing or another, and you're having to still press buttons on a trumpet, which is the least of the problem, I guess. I've seen Dave Gibble teach. He is a wonderful teacher, not just a trumpet player, but a wonderful musician, and he teaches that in his teaching and in his students. And it's always a pleasure to do these. I was going to, if I had my way, I would have put a picture of Dave Gibble tearing his hair out. But time will take care of that. Anyway, here he is, Maestro Dave Gibble.
Where are my jazz appreciation students? Clap louder. Come on. All right. It was really a great privilege. Every year I kind of think about things that we can do, and with our spring concert, because we've been doing kind of like theme concerts over the years. And I think that the last time we did a Duke Ellington themed concert was actually my first year down here when Cy was the director of the band and I was playing trumpet. I thought it was high time that we had a chance to play some more Duke Ellington. And also Billy Strayhorn, because a lot of his stuff is not that available, and so I wanted to get a chance, now it's available, to get a chance to really delve into this wonderful writer. For a jazz musician to play Duke Ellington is very similar to like a symphonic player playing the music of Beethoven or Brahms or Stravinsky. It's just the greatest thing. So I really appreciate the guys. What do you think of the performance tonight? And before we go any further, please let's have it one more time. I'm going to announce the guys in the band. Tom Mitchell, Hudson Furtado, Rod Nordwall, Devin Heinrichs, and Chris Ferranti on saxophone. Kevin Krapanik, Mike Egan, and we have Alan Lamp and Phil Beebe on trombone. In the back, Tim Walters, please wave, Albert Pereira, and Kevin Wild. And of course, we've had a chance to listen to our wonderful rhythm section tonight. Dolph Castellano on piano, Neil Baker guitar, Dave and Carl. And how about the gentleman who was your host for this evening, the guy who put all the notes together, Cy Pryweller. Now, Cy, I want you to come over here for just a second. I'm going to digress just a little bit. I don't know if you realize this, but Cy's been here 50 years.
Oh my God. Where did that come from?
He started in 1964, fall of 1964, and this is actually his 50th year with being involved with Palm Beach State. Now, the first question I have, this is a relatively recent picture of Cy, as you can tell. I wonder what Cy looked like back in those early days.
Oh, you didn't?
1965, folks.
It's only because I said something about him getting bald.
Oh, it gets better, folks. I really wanted to take a couple minutes here. We had talked about, among the music faculty, kind of, talking about how we would handle this, and we thought this is as good of a form as anything. So to give you a little bit of background on Cy, Cy is originally from Gary, Indiana, and he was born and raised in Indiana, earning his undergraduate and graduate degrees from a very prestigious school, the Indiana University in Bloomington. He studied additionally at Eastman School of Music, Berklee College of Music, University of Southern California, the Grove Workshops, and Western Michigan University Jazz Vocal Workshop. He served 4 years as a trumpet player in the the United States Air Force Band in Patrick, before accepting a teaching position in 1964 at was then Palm Beach Junior College, or Peanut Butter and Jelly colleges, I forget what they call it. So this is what I found. This was what was happening at 1965. This is the beginning of Cy's era here. Of course, you see that great portrait of Cy, and the guy with the yellow arrow there, that's Cy standing among the officers. I think he looks probably about, what, 17 or 18 at that time. In his 31-year tenure at Palm Beach State, he developed and directed jazz ensembles, concert bands, orchestras, brass and percussion ensembles, and conducted all the Broadway musicals presented by the Music and Drama Department. He was instrumental, so to speak, in developing the first jazz studies and popular music curriculum of any Florida community college or state university, the first jazz studies program. So let's see how time passes on here. 1969 through 1970. And this is my favorite picture right here. 1973, 1974. There's actually some folks that I know in here. I don't think he's here tonight, but I believe Nick Patsis is in this photo over here on the end. But anyway, there's Cy, and I love the pants, for those of you who remember the 1970s. In 1990, he inaugurated the first of an annual series called A Night to Remember, which was basically a genesis for these spring concerts that we've been doing over the past couple of years, focusing attention on American big band music. He received a recognition award from the Big Band Hall of Fame for his contribution to the promotion of big band music. After officially retiring from Palm Beach State full-time, I should say, in 1995, Cy continued to be an adjunct and worked with the college in a variety of ways, such as tonight, hosting our program, and is still active all over South Florida as a professional trumpeter, drummer, and percussionist. So here are some action shots of Cy. I'm guessing that the photo on the right with Ted Nite is probably early 1990s or late 80s. And I believe Dave Tomasello is the bass player. Am I correct, Dave? Dave Tomasello is the bass player. Top left, there's a concert from about 2003, 2004, that era, and Cy is narrating the concert. And of course, this the bottom left was Cy playing timpani with the Orchid City Brass just this last year. And I wanted to include some of Cy's favorite pursuits in here. Man About Town. Here's Cy at spring training up there. We went to see a Mets game, and reuniting with some old friends from the Jupiter Theater. You'll notice that there are non-alcoholic beverages on the table there. That's to my jazz appreciation students. And bottom right, Cy's favorite thing, going to breakfast at, I believe that's John G's. I believe that's where that is. So anyway, I just wanted to take just this second and this couple of minutes just to really thank Cy for 50 years of great excellence at Palm Beach State. And to thank him further, I got a little gift basket here, bag, with some very appropriate items. So I would like for you to at least show what some of these items are.
What?
Yeah, come on up. I want you to come on over here.
I didn't know this was going to end up as This Is Your Life. By the way, one of my department chairmen is sitting over there, Reuben Hale.
Oh, Reuben, all right.
He was responsible for, at the time, for this theater. Okay.
Look at the other side.
What is it? It's a folding cane. I'll use this. I can conduct with this. But it's got a maple hand grip. Okay, thank you. Is that it?
No, it's got
Is there a check in here?
Go for the other item first.
Heroes? What are these? Earplugs. What do you think I've been wearing all night? No more?
That's it.
That's it. And I've got a card. Is there money in here?
Close.
This is in lieu of payment
That's exactly right.
for tonight. A check for $10,000. Thank you very much. It's happy 50th year at Palm Beach State. You've been an important person to me since my arrival in 1955 as a mentor.
95.
Oh. 1990, and this is his best writing. In 1995, as a mentor, colleague, and
Most importantly.
most importantly, friend. Oh, that's so nice, David. Thank you.
I just wanted to point out that they are restaurant gift certificates, and if you need a companion, you know.
Oh, yeah. But you have to eat early dinner. The early bird.
Want to introduce the next two?
Oh, yeah, I'll do it. You can get ready. Well, thank you so much. I didn't expect this. Forgive me, your Norwegians, and just in case. Okay, well, we can finish this up now. Okay. I think after this evening's concert, and this was, I think, one of our goals, was that when you hear other bands now, whether they're contemporary bands or not, or when you hear the Duke Ellington Band, you'll be able to appreciate the style and recognize the style that we've talked about. I know most of you are going to go home right now and put on YouTube and listen to all the Duke Ellington things before you go to sleep tonight. But he did write music for the ballroom, the stage, the nightclub, the theater. I think Anatomy of a Murder is on cable sometime this week, and he wrote the music to that. But before you go home, we're going to hear our final selection, which is recorded by the Ellington Band in 1931. That was before I was born, by the way, in case you were thinking. That helped pave the way for the big band swing music that was to come later in the decade. Rockin' in Rhythm. Ellington thought that rockin' in rhythm was as close as an arrangement gets to sounding spontaneous. So here we go, Rockin' in Rhythm.
Thank you very much. Would you like to hear just one more quick one? I think you might recognize this one. Tuesday Night Band. Thank you very much. Have a safe trip home. Thank you very much. Good night. See you in class tomorrow.